We're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. That's right, you're listening to Coming Out Christian, a podcast about life at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith. This fun, faithful, and sometimes irreverent podcast is a production of Love Boldly, an Ohio-based nonprofit creating spaces where LGBTQIA+ people can flourish in Christianity. I'm one of your hosts, Siobhan Boyd Nelson, and my co-host is the Reverend Dr. Ben Hillscamp, Executive Director of Love Boldly. So join us, and let's find out who's coming out today. Ben, it's you again.
It is, Siobhan, and it's you. How are you doing?
I am doing really well. I could go for some warmer weather. I know this episode's going to come out end of June, so I'm probably going to be eating those words by the time this is said. But think back to that really chilly spring we were having, and I am disappointed in Mother Nature, which I probably shouldn't be. I think we're making Mother Nature's job harder for her.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of feel like the coolness we're having is, Mother Nature, A, reminding us that climate change is not just warming, and B, kind of saying like, y'all wanted spring, but I'm going to give you some fall in here too.
And that's the thing. I don't like fall. I really love spring and I don't like fall. So I'm like, oh, and mostly I just want to wear shorts. But also I am a human. I'm not like most Ohioans. If anyone has ever visited the great state of Ohio or seen us in the wild, you will know us by, especially I would say the male gender of wearing shorts. Anytime it is at 60, 50 degrees and above, I knew folks who wore shorts right down into 30 degrees, shorts and sandals. Are you one of those people, Ben? How cold is too cold for shorts? I am not one of those
people completely, but I mean, if it gets down to the 50s, yeah, I'll do shorts sometimes.
Will you?
I don't do sandals much, period, but definitely not past maybe like 55. But I also, when I lived and worked in Vermont, I had plenty of students who, it's like, oh, it's 35, it's a heat wave.
Oh.
Which sometimes in Vermont, that would be a heat wave, but still not a reason to wear shorts. You are very, very correct that is very typical of men in some parts of the more northern part of this country.
Yes, that is true. And so then thinking about this spring and how chilly it's been, if folks listening might know this about me, I love things that are a little bit darker, vampires, witches, things like that. And so this reminds me of the summer of either 1816 or 1817, I believe. It was the year without a summer. And that was the year that a volcano erupted on an island off the Indian continent, and it released so much ash into the atmosphere that there essentially was no summer, and that in parts of northern Britain, it actually snowed in July. So when former Miss America, Vanessa, what was her name? Vanessa Williams sang, sometimes the snow comes down in June. Indeed, one year the snow did come down in June during the year that there was not a summer. But we have not had a volcanic eruption, so I do not expect that out of 2026. So there is a lot of stuff in 2026 I wasn't expecting. The 2026 bingo card is an interesting one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna pass over that one because I can't really decide whether or not a volcanic eruption at this point in 2026 would
would it surprise us?
Where on the moral or whatever spectrum that would be.
Yeah, it would be really interesting, and I'm going to say this very tongue in cheek, but just to see whose fault it would be. Right. Like I just, anytime we have these, great big geologic phenomena, it's usually blamed on an oppressed or minority group. And so it'll be interesting to see whose fault that is in today's culture, in today's society. Okay, before we go any further down that road, Ben, because that's a dangerous one for us, let's jump into today's episode and meet today's guest, because today's guest is absolutely amazing and I cannot wait for our conversation. And that is because today's guest is the Reverend Charles Unique, who uses they, he pronouns. Reverend Charles is a gender anarchist, organizer, and ordained clergy whose life work centers the dismantling of oppressive systems and the liberation of marginalized communities. With over a decade of community rooted experience, Charles has emerged as a strategic co conspirator, facilitator, and advocate across movements for housing justice, food sovereignty, gender freedom, and Black trans liberation. They serve as the legal empowerment organizer at Tenants Transforming Greater St. Louis and former operations director at City Greens Market, where they advance housing justice and food sovereignty through grassroots strategy and community centered operations. Charles is the founder of Flower Boi STL, a peer led space for masculine people of color to dismantle toxic masculinity and build alternative modes of expression, and a co founder slash board member of THISTL, THISTL, supporting trans housing access across St. Louis. Their organizing, writing, and movement work have been featured in STL Magazine, KSDK News, NPR, and the University of Michigan's Police Brutality Teach Out, to name a few. A skilled researcher and designer, Charles designed the groundbreaking Home is Where Our Health Is report, which examines housing, health, and the structural forces shaping community well being. Their work combines policy analysis, design, and narrative to illuminate the lived realities of marginalized communities and advance pathways toward justice. Additionally, they have contributed to community based research and legal empowerment initiatives, including designing the Housing Navigators Program, a 7-month training program for tenants to become housing community paralegals and organizers. Charles holds degrees in legal studies and political science and is currently a Master of Divinity student at Eden Theological Seminary, integrating ministry and justice work. With two fire signs as their guide, Charles brings both tenderness and fierce transformative energy to every space they enter. Welcome, Charles. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be with you both.
Yes. All right. This is going to be a great conversation, but we got to start it off the way we start off all of our conversations. And that is with the question, what is your testimony? What is your story at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith?
I love the question. We got to go to the beginning. From
Mm-hmm.
the time I popped out of my mother's wound, my grandmother was always calling me a he, she before I
Oh.
even had words, right? Like, as I'm just bopping around as a toddler, she would just like lovingly say this about me. And growing up under that label, I really didn't understand it. But I
Mm-hmm.
went through several different transitions in my life. I was a lesbian from the time I was like 11 into coming out as trans in my early 20s. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
spent about over a decade now in a trans masculine identity, but I see myself as a gender anarchist. And I was also raised in a very Baptist household. There's
Mm-hmm.
not a moment I did not see myself at the church. We were at the church for Bible study in the middle of the week. We were there all day on Sunday. And we were also centered our life around community. And because of that, my identity was also at a place of tension. So even
Mm-hmm.
though I was always being celebrated in my youth for being somebody that was really outspoken and community involved, at the other time I was, ostracized for being queer and being very openly queer. And it's
Okay.
really because I have a fire sign, because I'm a Sagittarius, I really never knew how to like stunt myself and like be quiet. So
Mm-hmm.
time I got language around different queer identities, I was like, oh, I seen myself, I seen different models in community, and I was like, oh, that's me. And I was openly labeling myself in these identities. And my family didn't really know what to do with that. They were
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, we get grandma called you a he, she, but we want you to grow up to be a young lady. And I was like, well, if I'm thinking about the women around me, they're embodying all these different gender spectrums. And it was always, as a woman, I was always taught to be strong and be outspoken and to be my brother's equal. So
Mm-hmm.
I came into labeling myself as trans masculine, and people were just shook by that identity. I was just like, "What's wrong? Y'all were fine when I was like a strong black woman. What's the issue?" Uh,
Yes.
and it really and it took my, from continuing to push back against any type of boxes, that I found myself at 17 going through a camp called NCCJ, which is a social justice camp for youth, where I
Mm-hmm.
first really seeing other trans people in a positive manner. And then from then 17 and a half into 18, I went to a very conservative place. I went to Buffalo, Wyoming, in a very small town, about 5,000 white people. But I had just come out of the second closet. And in that, in being in the land and still being very active in church, I kept going back to that I'm whole and I'm loved as I am. And then I came back to St. Louis, and in my time at St. Louis, I actually lived in apartments of Canfield, and I was there when Mike Brown was murdered. And
Mm.
it's my entire life. It changed anything that I thought that I was gonna do growing up. It was not on the table anymore. And I kept seeing in those protests and movement spaces at the time, I kept seeing other queer people and other clergy members that were queer.
Mm.
And I just didn't know what to make of it, but I was still going actively involved in my church. But at my church, I still wasn't able to be whole because it was all these little moments, maybe doing a sermon that throw some stuff in from Leviticus and say, "Oh, I'm going to hell right fast." And I'm like, "Damn, I'm going to hell again? I thought we
Yeah.
were good, right? I thought we was
Yeah.
good." But it's because of those people that I found in those movement spaces in Ferguson that gave me a model of what was possible for me. And so I went on to found Flower Boi STL, which was to talk about the masculinity that I was experiencing in Ferguson, because I knew that decolonization was going to be the core of my identity in order to have
Mm-hmm.
something healthy and whole. Because the way that I had always seen Jesus be embodied was somebody who was transsexual, right? Somebody that was
Mm-hmm.
flowing on the margins of identity, because constantly Jesus was embodying more feminine attribute when it came to nurturing and caring communities.
Okay.
And found in that space, over the next 4 or 5 years, I started to get more curious about my own role in the church. And so I made it a commitment to center my life at St. John's, which is a Black feminist church, and a lot of people were involved in Ferguson. But then it took, you know, almost 2.5 years ago, when my grandmother on my father's side passed away, and going to the funeral and literally seeing Asaji Foseku, who is my biological uncle, but I didn't know that at the time. I've only seen him and interact with him in movement spaces. So we're protesting together. We're doing all these board meetings at town halls, but no idea that we're blood family. I mean, and it's wild because you put us side by side, we look like the same person. It's uncanny. But I just go up to him after the eulogy and I'm like, "Why are you here?" And he was like, "That's my mama." And I was like, "Okay, that's my grandma." He was like, "Well, whose kid are you?" And I'm like, "Lemons." He was like, "Well, Lemons my brother, my oldest brother." And I'm like, shook.
Yeah.
But then it started making sense. All the things that God had put in my path started to really come full circle. And then he asked me, after we started reconnecting, we were just sitting down. I was, telling him about my life, and he was telling me about things he heard about me and the things, because his best friend is my godmother. Like, I've been all over the country. I've been in DC with her. And he was just like, son, like, you're doing the work of a pastor. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not. I mean, I don't know if you know, but they ain't no trans pastors, ain't no lesbian pastors. And he was like, yes, there are. There are a whole bunch of them. And I'm like, they're not. And he was like, just look up T-Fam. And I'm like, T-Fam? And he was just like, just go to Atlanta with me, meet, meet, your vet founder. I'm like, all right. So I go to Atlanta and I'm just weeping the entire week. Cause I'm just like,
Mm.
here are these people who are reflecting the divinity and the God and the holiness that I've always named outside
Hmm.
of church in the church. And here are
Yes.
people who are deconstructing these institutions of power and capital in real time, right? And so I got ordained. And from there, I just started really integrating my life more into faith spaces because I knew how important it was to tell the truth about the church and about white supremacy in our churches.
Mm.
And
Yes.
because I don't, because that's always been my testimony, right? Is being on the margins. But I think there's also something really powerful moving from the margins and acknowledging your privilege wherever that may come in life to do something great because you love the Lord.
Mm.
And so yeah, that's where I am at life right now. It's not at all what I expected from life, but I just yeah.
That is absolutely a beautiful story in so many places that I want to touch on in that story. But first, I want to acknowledge something that I heard that was familiar. And that's because my wife is non binary and is masculine of center. And had a similar experience growing up where it seems like people in the family recognized
Yeah.
the gender anarchy that was going on within them, but then also were surprised when they came out, right? Like, wait, wait,
Yeah.
wait, wait, wait. But then also that issue of being raised to be a strong Black woman and being raised with many masculine, what we might call masculine attributes, but then being really surprised by your masculine identity. And it's like, but wait, this is what you were asking me to do. No?
Yeah, yeah, and it was actually in that line of just discernment and lots of therapy. Like if you can afford to go to therapy, do it. You will never regret it.
Amen.
And it's because I went like when I first came out, I was very binary. It was one box to another, right? And it
Okay.
was okay. This is the way the masculine men around me are performing. I just want to decolonize it in a way that is healthier. But then in that
Mhm.
decolonization, I said, well, the gender box kills all of us. We're all choking on this box. Even the
Mm.
people who are happy and whole in their identities are not whole when they're having to perform.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I got tired of the performance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when I've let go of the performance, I have really beautiful conversations with my older sister, and she's just like, "Yeah, look, I didn't think that as a woman I would be doing some of the things that I do and I love." I'm like, "Yeah."
Mhm.
Was it suffocating when you were trying to do different things? She was like, "Yeah, I guess you kind of right." And I said, "Yeah, isn't it great? Just let go. Just let go."
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so the second thing I want to touch on is that idea of models of possibility, and I said I had a very similar conversation actually with God because God's like, hey, you should like be a pastor or preach or something like that, and I was like, see, but also I'm a lesbian, and so that's not a thing. Like, isn't it funny when you tell God what is and isn't a thing? And I will tell you that the model of possibility that I saw was Bishop Yvette Flunder. So just, huge shout out to Bishop Flunder and the model of possibility that she has been for so many of us in this space. The idea that you can even be Christian and a member of the queer community. And so I want to know if you can speak a little bit more to that idea of queer clergy and what that means to have the existence of queer clergy and then that TFAM experience. Because I love TFAM.
I love TFM too. I mean, it's the breath of life.
Mm,
That's what it felt like
yeah.
when I seen other like clergy members who were Christian, who were queer, who were trans, who were non-binary. It felt like life-giving
Yes.
for the first time because my queer friends would tell you that the place where I had shame was in my Christian identity because of so much harm that we have done to queer people, to
Yes.
brown people, to black people in the name of God
Hmm.
instead of it being in their name, right? Because it was never in
Right.
God's name, never God's intention. But I had so much shame because I would be in these really radical spaces with other queer people, and then they will be sharing their harm with me. And
Hmm.
the God that I love has always shined his light on me. has always protected me, even in the darkest moments of my life.
Yeah.
And I felt like I couldn't share that with them because of all the pain that they felt. And so seeing other queer clergy, it lifted that off of me, because it let me know that, like, through all of that abuse, through all of that harm from institutions, it was never God's true voice. It was
Right.
never the voice of God. And then
Yeah.
when you start to pull that apart, you get to hear stuff clearer, right? And
Hmm.
it's just life giving. And to be at TFAM, I mean, that is my desire for anybody that's queer, whether they're Christian, to have that space of faith
Okay.
where people
Yeah.
reflect them, because I think that, like, Christianity doesn't have a monopoly on God, and I wish for all people, regardless of their belief system, to just have that safe space and faith
Hmm.
to be
Yeah.
whole.
So tell me more about we've heard about who TFAM is. You're not our first TFAM guest. We do love to have a TFAM guest on the podcast. But tell us a little bit more about your relationship with TFAM and how that organization has supported you. And then I'd love to hear more about your ministry as well and what that looks like in St. Louis, which is, St. Louis is just one of those spaces that I think we will look back on in 30, 40, 50 years and say, wow, so much of American culture, mindset, society, so much of who we are as advocates was birthed right there in St. Louis. So I'd love to hear you talk more about that space as well.
Yeah, so for me, T Fam has been a place when because I'm in seminary, right? I got
Hmm.
lots of questions. And so I can send an email, I can go to a Saturday call and just be held in my
Hmm.
curiosity. If I need a word or a prayer, that they're and are really present, and everybody is being so intentional about being relational, which is the covenant of God. And I've just been so loved and held in that space. And so not only do I attend things for the Midwest chapter for TFAM, but I also attend things on the West Coast because I travel a lot to Seattle. Um, and they're an extension of my larger family.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. That's
yeah.
beautiful. And then talk about the St. Louis activism community and what it has been like to be in that space and how you have grown. How does your ministry intersect with that space?
Yeah, so for me, because I'm queer, because I'm trans, because I'm black, those are my first loves.
Mm-hmm.
And then because we live on the Capitol, I'm always thinking about people who are marginalized economically. And St. Louis
Mm-hmm.
has a long history of being redlined because of the Delmar Divide. And so when I think about my activism, I'm always centering land and housing first. So my work as a legal empowerment organizer is I make the law accessible for community members, and that's done in three buckets: to know the law, to use the law, and to shape the law.
Mm.
I run a hotline where community members can call in, and I will help them interpret their situation and then empower them to make decisions that they feel most comfortable in, and then bring them into the base of organizing to then help us pass policy. So with my work, I've helped to pass right to counsel, which allows people to have an attorney for free for the first time in St. Louis City, as well as a mole ordinance, a rental registry, which allows people to look up their landlords
Mm.
information. I've also collaborated with the health department, the building department, and all of that is done by centering the most impacted. So a lot of community members that I work with, English may not be their first language. They are
Right.
queer, trans, and I'm helping them really navigate systems that are not built for them. So, for example, in Missouri, we do not have a non-discrimination law to protect queer
Okay.
people at all.
Right.
We do have one in the city, but it's been weakened because we live in a red state. So everything's preempted. You do something good, they say,
Hmm.
shit, let me take this away.
Yes. Yes.
Is most of my work. And then I love food justice. So I work and collaborate with local farmers to bring food that's affordable directly into the community. And so when I think about my role as a clergy member, that is making the church the home for people, so that when they
Mm-hmm.
enter into St. John's, we're having events where people can access information around housing. They're accessing information about rental assistance. They're accessing information about food pantries, and it's really bringing it to the center of their lives. You
Yeah.
can't really see God unless you see it in community, and that means that it needs to be a verb. So I work with churches to make sure that they're centering the most impacted, that from the beginning of service to the end, right?
Yes.
That people really see themselves reflected back.
That is absolutely beautiful. And as someone who has been an advocate for a number of years, I really appreciate that model of solving the immediate problem, but then also addressing the root of the harm, right? Because you could do one or the other, and so often our services are one or the other. We're either going to solve your problem today, or we're going to work on eliminating the root of the problem. But the model you shared with us is just hits it at both ends, and that's so great.
Yeah, because I find that we deserve more than band-aids,
Yes, we do.
right? We deserve more than band-aids and quick fixes. And in this decade of work, most people that I meet don't have the capacity to dream.
Whew, say that again.
And I want to build capacity for people to dream. So that means,
Yes.
yes, like I address the immediate issues, but then
Mm-hmm.
I walk with them and I accompany them and I'm present with them, because that's what Jesus models, is accompaniment,
Yes.
right? I'm not
Yes.
telling you that I know the answers, because I don't. You know
Mm-hmm.
the answers. You know what's going to fix this issue over time, and you know how best to write policy so that it reflects your community and reflects your voice. So it has
Yeah.
to be that threefold approach. And I really learned that through my work with NYU and the Bernstein Institution, because I'm a part of a legal empowerment cohort. It's the first in the United States, but a lot of our teachings, it comes from the global South. And then we're
Mm-hmm.
tailoring that to what we're seeing in the United States. But they've really taught me that you have to do it all.
Yes.
And you have to be okay with it being slow, because it's
Mm.
about building capacity, right? They can tear anything down in a second, but what does it mean to build the spirit for longevity?
Ooh, you can say that again. That is it. Yeah, like it is real change. Systemic change is slow, and does it's difficult, right? And it's a slug. It is a marathon, but it's a marathon in the desert with very few. And
Yeah.
they don't have drink stops in
Mhm.
the desert, and it's meant to really wring you out and get you dry to that point where you can't dream, right? There are no oases where you're there and you're dreaming of what could be and it not being a desert any longer. And that's beautiful, because when you talk about accompanying folks on this path, on this journey, being there to dream for them when they can't dream, or at least hold the dream for them until they can dream it again, that's such a beautiful way of saying being a pastor or being pastoral, right? Is walking with people.
Yeah, and that is why Seiko got me to got me. That is how he got me. It's because it's just like I don't think there's any other way.
Hmm.
That's what we see over every story of God's presence, whether God is speaking directly in the text or is someone embodying that through presence and accompaniment, saying, even in the story of Ruth and Naomi, they're saying, like, I'm going to be in covenant with you. I'm not going to push you away. You can't get rid of me. And I think
Mm.
that we all have to model that, even when it's difficult, even when we are in the desert, because even dry bones give life if we look hard.
Whew. Yeah, that is tough. I think, especially in our culture, and I don't want to call it necessarily cancel culture, but I think just throwaway culture, right? We can dispose of so many things and get a new one so quickly and easily. And I think we kind of feel that way about relationships, unfortunately, that this relationship is disposable, or this person is disposable. I can find another one, because really we're so connected. There's a billion people that you have the opportunity to connect with. And so isn't this relationship disposable? But really they're not. And I think that's the joy that we're missing sometimes.
Yeah, and I think for myself, and I was reading this Times article right after the pandemic ended. We're still in it, right?
And we're still in it, yes.
We're still in it, but they were talking about the epidemic of loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have all these tools at our disposal, all these ways to connect, but we're
Yes.
not connected with each other.
It's almost too much. It's almost like when you give a 4-year-old too many options. I always say you get like 2 options, maybe 3 if we're on vacation, but generally, because more than that, you're just asking for chaos. And I think as humans, right, there's not just, I think humans really are just adult children. We have too many options, and our ability to pick our the mode of connection that works well for us, and being honest with ourselves that this is the mode of connection that works well for me, and then going deep with it, because people have FOMO, but other people are connecting this way and other people are connecting this way, and maybe I'm missing connections over here. And look, I got the worst FOMO out of anybody. um Look at Ben. Yep, he definitely agreed with that one. But we're not, I think it's the depth of the connections, not how many of them there
Yeah.
are. It's the quality, not the quantity.
And it's about keep choosing each other, because it's like
Ooh,
if you've
yeah.
ever did any type of harm on a small scale, you know what that shame feels like, right?
Mm-hmm.
That fear of like, oh, I'm gonna lose this relationship, or it's not gonna be the same, and what does it mean about me?
Mm-hmm.
And I say to myself, and I say to other people, what an opportunity it is to have committed harm and then learn something and then be transformed.
Yeah.
Because we're all going to do things to be quote canceled. But what if they cancel you for something that's radical versus canceling you something for something small, interpersonal that you can fix if you keep choosing the
Yeah.
relationship?
Right.
And I've learned that, I love both of my parents dearly, but they didn't know how to raise a queer kid.
There it
They made
is.
a
Yeah.
lot of bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But if I would have counseled them and had no relationship with them, I wouldn't be where I am at 32 years old, where my mother is writing books of poetry, dedicating it to me, and she's like talking to other people at her mega church, which is his own other thing,
Woo.
about what it means to like have a trans son, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if I would have just let go of that relationship, you build boundaries, right? Because you have your own needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are sacred. But also we have to keep choosing each other. Because
Oh,
if you look at God in the Old Testament, he kept choosing us. He had no reason to choose us. He had not a lick of reason to choose us.
yeah. If we go back to the nation of Israel of the Old Testament, it's like y'all done messed up, and God came back and chose you again. Like once you're chosen, the choice
That's
keeps
it.
being made, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I actually say that to my wife. Like I wake up every morning and I choose you. I choose to be married to you today, and so I'll look at them and say, I choose you, and that's our
Yeah.
I choose to be married to you today. But that's different from, I think, so many of our relationships where it's like, oh, you're here, this is a matter of convenience, or you're disposable. Saying I choose you to anybody, a partner, a church, a faith, a community member, an issue, that means something. That is really saying something with your whole heart when you say I choose you.
Yeah. And we have to treat all of our relationships as covenant, not just our intimate ones.
Mm.
Because there are so many single people, right? And
Yes, yes.
you can't sit there and just say that those are the most important relationships.
Right.
And that's what they want to force feed us.
Mhm.
I need my besties, right? I need the people at my church. I need my coworkers, my collaborators, my co-conspirators, and my allies. And it's
Yes.
a choice. And I
It
think
is a
about
choice. Yeah.
actively in the movement spaces, especially as someone who really believes in working with white people, right?
Mm.
We need them.
Mhm.
Also, and we need their wellness, and their wellness is tied to my wellness, and vice versa. So it's a
Right.
church. It is a every time to continue to make that choice, right?
Yeah.
Not to
Yeah.
model something that is like rooted in exclusionary practices again and again. And so it's like
Yeah.
it's difficult. I'm about to move to a place where ain't nothing but white people. And I'm so excited because it means to me I get to practice that
Ooh.
commitment and that covenant that I say in movement of that I want to work with anybody who's willing to work with me.
That's so affirming, and your arms are so open wide when you say that. Like that's what your arms aren't open wide literally on the screen, but when you say that, that is the visual that I get, that your arms are open wide and you're willing to be in relationship with anyone who's willing to bring that good energy right to you and be in relationship with you. And that's a tough place for so many of us to be. So thank you for modeling that for us. We've talked about so many models of possibility. Thank you for modeling that for all of us today.
No, thank you. And shout out to my therapist, making it happen every week. Making it happen every week. Literally.
Yes, this shout out to the therapist. I believe in therapists, prescribed medications, and prayer. It is a wondrous trifecta, with the getting that doctor in there, getting that therapist in there really helps. Yeah. Anything else that we have that you would want to cover? I mean, I just feel like there's so much that you could teach us, and I could keep you here for the rest of the day having this great conversation, but I want to make sure that we covered everything you want to talk about. And of course, I'm going to look at Ben and make sure Ben doesn't have any questions for us today. I saw him nodding along there.
That's a really good question. I say this in every space that I'm in. Let's not build any more churches.
Say more.
And the reason I'm saying that is because we're seeing a decline in churches and church attendance and aging buildings. Let's knock
Mhm.
them down. Let's build some affordable housing. Let's build some community gardens. Let's build some urgent cures. Let's do something different. And it's still going to be a church.
Ooh,
But let's
okay.
not continue to say we need more churches.
I think that is a beautiful message to end on, because Ben, it goes right back to where we were. The question, I don't know if we're asking the same questions this Pride, or if we did ask the same questions this Pride, but that's been one of the questions we've asked at our Pride celebrations is, where is church for you? Where is that sacred space? Where is that covenant space? It need not necessarily be in a church building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is absolutely beautiful. Reverend Charles, thank you so much for being with us today. It has been an absolutely amazing conversation. Thank you for bringing your beautiful, inclusive, and affirming spirit to this conversation.
I'm like deeply honored to be here. Thank you so much. Like, this has been honestly the highlight of my entire week.
Oh, yay. Love to hear it.
So I'm
Yes.
super grateful.
Oh, thank you. We'll have to have you back because it was such a really good time.
Thank you.
And I want to acknowledge both, just among the three of us, but also for our listeners, that unlike many, I mean, Siobhan and I sit down, we create, these long lists of people we'd love to have on the podcast, from like our friends here in Central Ohio to Bishop Flunder and, other big names that we may or may not ever get. Charles, you're actually, I think, the first and possibly the only so far person who like reached out to us and said, "Hey, this sounds cool. I'd love to be one of your guests," which I love. From my perspective, I love because, you know, it's a different kind of, how we find our guests for the podcast. I mean, you saw something I posted, or you heard about the podcast or something, and reaching out to us. um I don't know. I just think it speaks a lot to you and to, um how people are finding what we're trying to do here. So I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Yeah, I didn't even know if y'all were gonna respond back, but I seen it on like the TFAM Facebook group, and I was like, this is really fascinating. And I got to listen, and I was like, I love all these great perspectives because for me, I'm hungry for this type of space.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I'm just like so deeply grateful.
Awesome. Yes, we are hungry. And if you are hungry for these types of spaces, y'all, keep listening. Tell your friends. I think there are more folks out there who are hungry for these types of spaces. And please spread the word about TFAM as well as Love Boldly. Both organizations are making more space for folks like us to be whole within our faith spaces. I love the way that you put that, Charles, of being whole within our faith spaces. And I think that's what both organizations really are passionate about.
Yeah, y'all doing it in real time.
As are you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. All right, y'all, let's jump into our two segments. The first one is the query of the day. And yes, that is a pun. All right, first I'm going to ask the Ben and Charles to answer first, and then we want you, our listeners, to jump on Instagram and answer this query for us. And I'm going to go back to something that Charles said, and that is having these models of possibility. And this doesn't necessarily have to be in a faith space, but where have you been in a situation where you went, wait, I can do that? Or someone who shares my identities can do that thing? Like, that's actually possible for me. And I'm going to shoot it over to Ben first and see if Ben can come up with something before I ask Charles if he has another one to share.
I mean, I've definitely had many of those in my life. Um, Definitely when, I think like Charles said, and we've had many other guests who've said the same. When I came out, finding out that yeah, I can still do this clergy thing. I don't have to be in the closet to be a minister, to be ordained.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one for me, and I'm not going to say this probably the right way, if there is a right way, but one of the things I remember is, so I have always heard of TFAM. I knew TFAM. I knew Bishop Flunder, or well, I knew of Bishop Flunder, knew her by reputation. And I always thought TFAM was such a cool organization, such a cool space, was doing such great work. But, and I'm just going to say this, I always assumed that TFAM was a BIPOC only organization.
Mm-hmm.
And we are majority, particularly folks drawn from the black, quote unquote, black church and black Pentecostal traditions. But I remember when someone was like, Ben, we have white people too. You can be a member of TFAM. We won't exclude you.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just remember feeling like, oh my goodness, I can actually. It's not just I can engage with this group, or I can collaborate with this group. I can be a member of this group in a way that still acknowledges the harm that many people who look like me and sound like me and present like me have done in these spaces, but I can be more than a partner in this space. I can be a member of this space and do work in a way that is perhaps a little bit different than I have while working with particularly Black communities. So again, I'm sure I'm not saying this the best way, but that was something for me that was very affirming, and affirming more so than as as a queer person, as an ally, as a whoever whatever identities we're talking about. It was just affirming in a way that I really can't put words around. But it's one of those things I really appreciate about TFAM, as well as appreciating the wonderful group of aspiring anti-racist ally white people, particularly white clergy, that I have found as friends and as colleagues and mentors in a way within TFAM.
Yeah.
And again, that is both because of TFAM, it's also beyond TFAM. So that's something that I really appreciate, and I really appreciate, having someone who's like, yeah, you can be in this space, and be a contributing member of this space as well.
That's awesome. Charles, is there something that you can think of?
I'm really thinking about KB Fraser, who is a Black Jewish rabbi who I met during Ferguson, and I play a lot of instruments, but I never
Hmm.
did anything with percussion. And he just gave me a pair of sticks one day out in the street, and he just was like, "Hit these together and keep the time and a beat." And I was like, "All right." It's a random man talking to me, and I got to like, but he kept taking an interest in me and
Hmm.
asking me about myself and asking me about my interests. And then he disclosed his gender identity to me, and I was like, this is the like I've never met another older trans people, because as you know the statistics like we know about trans women that
Hmm.
35 years, right? And
Right.
I'm meeting somebody well past their 30s,
Yes.
and I'm like, oh, not only can we grow old, we can be successful, we can be seen, and we can
Yes.
impact community. And
Ooh.
the relationship that I have with KB, I'm just grateful. I'm just so grateful for, because it let
That
me
is,
know that like anything's actually possible. You just got to be willing to stay around for it. Yeah.
yeah. That is absolutely beautiful. What a great story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I'm going to go way back to when I didn't know very much about what was possible, but of course thought I knew everything that was possible back when I was 17, and looking for colleges. And I was being recruited by Howard University. And I was talking to my guidance counselor at the time, and I said, well, I can't go to Howard. And he said, well, why can't you go to Howard? And I said, well, because I didn't grow up around Black people. I act too white to go to Howard. And I didn't think that I would be accepted. I felt very much like um, I felt very weird, unique in a weird, in a bad, in a negative way. In my situation, having grown up in the suburbs and gone to private school, and just didn't think that there would be a place for me at Howard. And he expressed to me that that wasn't true. He really encouraged me and let me know that while he didn't go to Howard himself, that he knew lots of people who did, and that there were plenty of little Shavons running around Howard's campus, and that I wasn't nearly as unique as I thought I was. And he was completely right about that. So I say that to say, like, sometimes you just need what is possible, or what we think is possible can be very narrow, can be a very narrow view because of what we've been exposed to. So sometimes that model of possibility seems so simple or basic looking back on it. But from your perspective, all you knew was what you knew, and all you could see is what you could see until someone could come by and take those blinders off. So thank you to all of the models of possibility out there, and a reminder to everyone that you might be a model of possibility. In fact, you probably are. So keep being you. You're amazing. Yay. And jump on Instagram. Let us know who has been your model of possibility, or when have you have had a model of possibility experience in your life. We would love to hear from you. All right, time for our second segment. We are going to kick it over to Ben, who is going to give us our moment in queer history, which is a great one because of today's date. Ben?
Yes, indeed. Although I have to apologize to Charles and Siobhan because I misread this as we were preparing just before we started recording, but it actually, I think, makes this really even more intersectional and kind of a cool coincidence. So, as some folks know, um, June 28th today is the first day of what became known as the Stonewall riots in New York City. While Stonewall was not, in fact, the first time that a group of queer people publicly agitated, fought back for their rights and for their community, it is the one that really sort of launched what has become known as the queer rights, LGBTQIA plus rights movement, at least here in the United States. But what folks might not know, particularly if you're not from New York City or haven't been around that part of New York City, um, in 1969, when the Stonewall riots set off, there was approximately 2 blocks away was what at the time was known as the Women's House of Detention. It was a women's only prison that by that point had a stunningly negative and stunningly awful record of human rights abuses, particularly against queer women, women of color, and trans women. So basically everyone except white women. Um, so while the Stonewall riots were happening, there was also a riot and protest going on at this prison. And some of the folks who had been at Stonewall earlier in the morning on June 28th then walked the 2 blocks to the prison and were demonstrating, particularly demonstrating for a group of women known as the Panther 21. These were Black women, all members of the Black Panther Party, who had been arrested several months earlier for a conspiracy that it seems was completely fabricated, but for a conspiracy to bomb sites in New York. They would later be acquitted. Any other charges were dropped, but one of the women who was at this prison inside as a prisoner was Afeni Shakur, the mother of Tupac Shakur. She, however, remembers, and she would later say that she remembered looking out the windows of the prison and seeing protesters outside standing in solidarity with her, with the Panther 21, who had signs about gay rights. And she attributed this to in her later years and later activism, was the moment where she recognized that her struggle as a Black woman was connected to the struggle of what she would describe as gay women, but also gay people in general. And it was the moment that she also felt that her work as a feminist, as a Black person, needed to intersect with the burgeoning gay rights movement. And she also expressed her thoughts on this matter to Huey P. Newton, one of the founders of the Black Panther Party. So anyway, I just find this to be a really cool coincidence of things that were going on, and a really cool, kind of intersection and beginning of someone who is so well recognized as a womanist, as a feminist writer and activist, but kind of recognizing, hey, these people stood in solidarity with us. We need to be in solidarity with them.
Wow, that's a really, really cool insight into, you think you know the story, but there's always more to the story. And it's just so cool how all of these struggles intersect. Not that I want our communities to be struggling, but when we really step back and look and we see the intersections, it's like, no, we need to be in community. That's how things get done. Yes. All right. Thank you, Ben, for that moment in queer history. Well, y'all, that brings us to the end of another amazing episode, if I may say so myself. I cannot thank our guest, the Reverend Charles Unique, enough for being here. Charles, is there anything that you want to promote, any social media that you would like to share with our listeners, anything that's happening after June 28th?
I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this podcast today. And then for anybody that's interested in being plugged in with some of the work that we're doing here in St. Louis, please check out my Instagram, which is that dude _ Charlie, because then you'll find the other organizations that I'm a part of on my page. Because in July, I'll be doing recruitment for the Housing Navigator program. So if you're interested in being a community paralegal, knowing more about how to defend housing rights in St. Louis and Missouri, please check out the class. It is completely free. We actually pay you to attend. We give a $50 stipend for every class. And then we hire some of the people out of each class to become a part of our support staff and our canvassers. So if you're looking to have a meal is at night, we do dinner, child cooks provided, and we try to make it accessible, low barrier as possible so that people can just be in a space of learning.
That is amazing. We'll make sure to throw some links up on the Instagram in case y'all are looking for more information about that wonderful program. Okay, I got to ask Ben, what is going on with Love Boldly? Any announcements for Love Boldly this week?
Yes, indeed. First off, I want to give a big shout out to one of Love Boldly's board members, and who has also been one of our guests on Coming Out Christian, and her wife, Envy and Katie Gay. They are doing a renewal of their wedding vows this afternoon of same day this episode's coming out. I know many of us for the Love Boldly community will be there with them. Also want to just remind folks in our network that we are hosting a program after probably disappearing for the month of July. We are hosting a exciting program on August 15th called Over the Rainbow, a symposium on LGBTQIA plus death and dying. A lot of buzz in our community or in the Central Ohio community. We are, as the time of when we're recording, we are still working to make this event hybrid, but it definitely will be available in person, and we really encourage anyone to come out and be part of that. It is free to the public. We have a wonderful grant from the Oasis Fund to make this free and available to anyone, and is a conversation that, while we recognize that many folks have a hard time having, is still one that we definitely need to have. So again, there's more information about that event on our website. And I'd encourage folks to check out that event and any of our other resources at www.loveboldly.org.
Thank you, Ben. And don't forget, we've got merch. If you are a fan of Love Boldly, of this podcast of Jesus and telling people that you are a queer person who loves Jesus, please check out Love Boldly's new to us merch that is can be found on the website there at loveboldly.org. All right, y'all. Thank you so much again to Charles. Thank you to Ben for being an amazing co-host. And thank you to you for listening, sharing, leaving comments, and letting all your friends know about your favorite podcast, Coming Out Christian.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope this conversation encouraged you, challenged you, and maybe just helped you feel a little less alone on your journey. If this podcast has been meaningful to you, would you consider supporting the work of Love Boldly? Love Boldly's mission is to create spaces where LGBTQIA plus people can flourish in Christianity, and your donation helps make conversations like this one possible. You can give at www.loveboldly.net/donate. That's www.loveboldly.net/donate. Want to stay connected with the podcast? Follow us on Instagram at comingoutchristian_podcast for updates, resources, and community. Until next time, remember that you can be queer and Christian and queer.